This is Dick Whitney, and today's presentation is something I'm very excited to give with regard to American Optical. I started thinking about what I wanted to present, and the achievements of American Optical have been well documented, and at a later date I will go into those in great detail. But what I wanted to pay tribute today is the people that made AO great. American Optical still has influence around the world in businesses that were offshoots, and locally like Shot Fiber Optics and AO Eyewear in town, and even Carl Zeiss Vision, which I work for. In any case, AO was made great by the families and the people. Here's an example of the Pluffs, but many families were, generations worked there, including mine, 2 generations. My father and I, that's me with my sister and my mom, waiting for Dad in front of AO in 1954. There's Dad and I on the beach at Pluffs, Edgartown, wearing American Optical outfits. AO reunions have occurred throughout the years, and I continue to run them with Peg. They are twice a year. This is an example one we had in 2000, there about 2001. The medical staff, Dr. Allen and staff, they're most of them deceased, unfortunately. Bob Innis and the Splains, they're all deceased. And in this presentation, in a short time later, I will go through a list of the names that I've compiled of the people who have been deceased, and it's by no means complete, but I'll show that in a little while and explain it. This again is a reunion when I was at Rom's. It was later held at Crane Street, and that's hiding Jenkins, who's deceased, a good family friend. They're now held at the Southbridge Hotel. That's also John Davis, who's deceased. He hired my father, standing up. He hired my father in 1947. The Sigmunds, Walt and his wife, he was involved in Todd AO and fiber optics, and great guy. These are some of the emblems of American Optical through the years. And we had a reunion in 2002 that Peg and a whole group helped me with, where we had 500 people come. And this is kind of a tribute to the people, but also a look at that reunion. This was the committee that worked on the reunion at the time, and my thanks again to them, something that's still talked about to this day. And the staff of Franklin Realty in the hotel and others also helped coordinate this event. This is the committee when it was first meeting in the early spring of 2002. Margot Fontaine I'd like to especially thank, because she was my right-hand person working with me as well as Peg and the group. There we are on the stairs at the main plant after they were refurbished, and now it's the hotel. Dave Butler is there on the right, Mike Montigny and Gabe McCarthy. They're all very helpful in this reunion, and people from around the world came, from Florida, from as far away as France and California, and John Young, who helped with the museum, came back, and you'll see pictures of him. That's Dave Wiggum and Peg. Oh, and apparently I threw the same picture in. Well, that will happen once in a while, but I hope you understand. This is Peg the night before, where we were a little bit stressing out for the details of the next day. We actually stayed at the hotel in preparation. That's the hotel in the morning, a view from our room. It was a great event, and everyone wore badges with the decade of service on the emblem of the logo. That's Peg, Dave Butler, John Salsey, and it was a fun event. We had items from the museum on display, and there are exciting events and happenings with the museum. And by the way, this presentation is brought to you by the Optical Heritage Museum. That's Glenna Zaborny, one of my bosses, his wife. They came from Florida, and they're looking at some of the items. And here we are. The man on the very right, Georges Goujon, was from France, and he came especially for that trip. And that's Joe Zaborny. And Marge Breen on the very left, she's executive secretary and helped with that. And John Young standing on the left with his wife Patty sitting down, and Jim Bonnell and his wife, and my mom. And Cindy Capillo did a display of Joe Capillo's photographic and other items. And this is John Young. He stayed in this room, was where the museum was located at the time, and it kind of freaked him out. But he really enjoyed coming back. That's the door to what was the museum, and now is a hotel room. Since 2002, well, really since 2000, it's been in storage. But we have some great plans coming up for the museum. George Gajon picking up his badge in the hotel lobby. And again, Cindy Capillo had some great items on display. And I'm hoping when we do have displays in the museum that we have a whole Southbridge area because we have in the museum a lot of Southbridge memorabilia, and I'd like to grow that as well. As you can see, this is Will Hicks, who helped start fiber optics in town, and we'll be doing more on recognizing fiber optics. That's my dad and Ruth McDonough and Joyce Nass, standing in the lobby with Kay, and Judy, who was the photographer, Judy Ferguson, did a great job, and you'll see pictures shortly taken of the group. This is working on a display. That's Debbie Sickle, who was working there at the time, and Ron Ferguson. Well, we're doing some last-minute setup. I think that's artwork from Charlie Gollin, who's a great artist, and my mom, who stayed there the night before the reunion, and we had a great time. It was something that I think there were more than 250 people who actually were AO alumni, along with their spouses and friends and others. And this is some of the American Optical display. The hotel has had a number of events, sponsored events, and it's doing quite well now. But this was the first display, the first event at the hotel. Rebecca Brogan, who was helpful on the committee as well. So we had a great time that day, and I know some of you watching this probably were there, and I hope you enjoyed it. We will be, there's Will Hicks again, we will be looking for community involvement as we go forward on the American Optical and Industry Museum, and more to come on that soon in the upcoming weeks. But you can see here's the crowd. And there was a rededication of the plaques that are now at the base of the stairwell. If you go into the hotel, you still see them. They were cleaned up, taken down, and then remounted back where they belong. One of them is a gift from the town, and one of them is in recognition of the building of the main plant clock tower in 1901, I believe. It's the date on the inscription. You'll see shortly the dedication ceremony again. These photos are somewhat out of order, but you can see the crowd, and it was a fun day. John Young talking again, and we actually auctioned off a few items to sponsor and help with the cost of this event, and this is the auction table that was there. Again, this is May 28th, 2002, when we had that a large gathering. Again, we have gatherings now at the hotel every 6 months. They're usually the first or the second Tuesday or thereabouts in June and December. I have to be a little flexible, but we basically have a buffet luncheon. All are welcome to attend. It's usually around $20. It's nice to let us know, but anyone who has interest, whether you work there or not, is welcome. And we usually have 30 people thereabouts, but I'd like to grow that. So hopefully if you're watching this and feel like coming, contact me as June approaches. We plan on having it, and it's a fun event, and there'll be more news. This is Steve Brady, and this is the actual rededication ceremony. He represented the Historical Society for town. This is the ceremony where their plaques are rededicated. And if you haven't seen these, I suggest you go into the hotel, go up the stairway in the back, and to the marble stairways, and at the base you'll see these plaques. And they're from the town. Will Hicks again, talking to another AO employee there. John Salsi at the right. He's retired now from the safety branch. It's now 3M, but it was AO Safety, then it became Aero, then 3M. And that business for years was a real mainstay to People of American Optical and its growth during its heyday. Let's see. This again is the ceremony. I'd forgotten I had these many pictures, but hope you're enjoying them. These Judy Ferguson took, and this is the actual dedication ceremony, where we're going through rededicating these plaques. So this is the hotel lobby, and for those who've never been in, I suggest you go. Shades Lounge is usually open in the evening, and the whenever there's business at the hotel, which is much of the time now, the restaurant is also open. And this is the actual May 28th. Here I am giving a little speech. In my thinner days, it's shocking to me how people and myself have changed. I don't think I've changed, but I guess I have. And again, more on the plaque, but this was a historically significant moment in time for American Optical and the workers of American Optical. And again, that's what this presentation is about. This is the actual wording of the plaque, but the list that will be coming up shortly is a list that I've compiled of American Optical workers who are deceased. And I wanted to explain this before we start the list, that really it's a list I put together and by no means complete, but as we have reunions, we go through the list with the employees and try and remember others. So please, if you have a loved one or a friend who's not on the list but worked at American Optical, let me know, and this will be coming up shortly. There's Judy getting ready to photograph the large crowd that we had of AO employees. And there they are, she's on the crane. This is the employees, I think, from the 1940s and 50s that were there. Then this is the 1960s and 70s. And then finally the whole crowd of those that could make it. And this is May 28th, 2002 at the reunion. That, again, my thanks to the committee and my thanks to Peg for putting up with me. What follows next is this list of about 1,200 names, 18 printed pages in small print that I've compiled of AO workers, employees who are unfortunately deceased. This is actually in recognition of those who died in World War II in action that were American Optical employees, and they're on the list. And I thought I was going to read it, but I think instead I'll go through and read some recollections from a few people who, prior to their death, submitted something to me. And again, I love to collect Southbridge recollections or AO recollections, so please submit it. This first one is from Jim Foley, who was Chief of Security from 1966 to 1982, and he said, "1 year before I retired after 21 years with Mass State Police, I had been offered a job at AO by retired Colonel Carl Larson, a former commander of the State Police. When I knew I was going to work with AO when I retired, I took 2 courses in the evening division of Northeast University in Boston on government security programs, as the AO was involved in classified contracts with the Defense Department in the late 60s and mid-70s. Larson was working for AO as manager of corporate security since his retirement from the State Police in 1963. When I came to work at AO in 1966, part of my responsibility was for coordinating security requirements between AO and the Department of Defense every 3 months. I recall very clearly the first inspection by the DoD in the early part of 1966, when there were about 5,800 employees at the Southbridge working there in 3 shifts, and another, he said 17,000, but I think it's around 12,000 employees working for AO worldwide. Every person in management had a security clearance, in addition to those employees who were working directly with classified contracts. Most of the employees were involved with lasers and night vision projects during the Vietnam War. Another of my responsibilities was interviewing and photographing each applicant for a security clearance. In the 16 years I was involved with this work, I estimated I took at least 2,000 photographs, and no one once told me that they liked the picture I took of them. You'll see at some point a picture of Jim Foley standing with the 1970 plant security force and the names beneath them. That was from Jim Foley. This next recollection is from Bob Innis, who died, unfortunately, I believe it was in 2009. Close family friend. He actually stayed with us during the flood in 1955. This is what Bob wrote. I wrote with Bob Innis after I met with him. In the summer of 1999, Bob and I talked about his experiences at AO, and as he had been a close family friend, having joined the company shortly before the flood of 1955. During that time, he stayed in our home, and I recall Bob helping me play with my blocks. The engineer helped him make a shoot-to-shoot, as we called it, a tower that allowed marbles to shoot down the ramps he made. In any case, during the early and mid-1960s, Bob was involved in AO's cardiac instrument division, which I recall was in Bedford, Mass. Bob talked about an article in the New England Journal of Medicine he wrote in it appeared in 1963. He said that Bill Bernhardt and Robin Innis worked on the transillumination of a ventricular septum in open-heart surgery. The significance of this work is that it was demonstrated in medicine that fiber optics had utility because the source of light could be made remote from the subject matter being illuminated. The second article, Gamble and Innis, was a visualization of the inside of the heart through fiber optic cardioscope. The significance of his work was this was the first time it was demonstrated that the visualization of subject matter inside the body could be done. The next recollection is from Herm Kreissle, who unfortunately passed away, I believe it was earlier this year. I had the good fortune to know Herm and to have worked with him at American Optical, but this is what he wrote in September 2000. I had no intentions to get a job with American Optical. As a matter of fact, I had never heard of AO. It was in July 1952 when I took a vacation trip to Cape Cod and went through Massachusetts and New Hampshire that I stopped in Keene, a news store. I had a news store for an ice cream cone. The local paper was just distributed, which I bought and find out how the little town works. I had worked in New York City at the time. There on the back page was an ad looking for a mechanical engineer by the American Optical Scientific Instrument Division in Keene. I was curious to find out what the optical company in Keene would look like, so I went to an old warehouse where the company was located. 3 hours later, after a lengthy interview with Kelly Hannon, the plant manager, I was offered a job. Little did I know that AO was in the process of building a new plant at the other end of town. AO Keene was an ordnance plant, a satellite of the scientific instrument plant in New York, Buffalo, New York. We worked on the Y-4 bomb site, an Air Force contract with IBM. It was interesting work, much of the state-of-the-art in regards to optical precision and new ferrous material usage, like stainless steel 404. Our technical guidance and control came from the Buffalo Plant Engineering Group. The overall management of the finance control was located in Southbridge. I had never heard of AO Southbridge, but people told me it was a really huge place. So one day I had a chance to go to AO Southbridge. A glass fusing job had to be done on a bomb site dome, and the glass works at AO was that place. I was just in awe when I saw the American Optical Southbridge complex. After going over bridges, around corners, past the research lab and the powerhouse plant, I finally found the glass processing lab under the supervision of Merton Smith. Needless to say, after that experience, I began to realize I was a very small part playing in the big league. As the month went by, we had a contract to manufacture 48th aerial camera, and a man by the name of Dr. Baker, the designer, was walking in the hollow grounds of AO research. By much help of the insistence of the AO lab was given to Keene by Art Kavanaugh, a fine person who understood the limitation of the, quote, farmers of New Hampshire in the manufacturing precision optics. He surely had a lot of patience with us. He and Bob Holloran, our local scientist, got along fine. Over the years, we gradually changed from a military operation into something more commercial, products and manufacturing. We made lenses for Todd AO, and some of us were invited to the opening of the film of Oklahoma in New York City with Mike Todd at the Mike Todd Theater. Later we made the cyclopic microscopes and other commercial products. The AO Southbridge lab was our last word in technology, and we treated the learned people of the research lab with very great reverence. Then came the Sidewinder fuse project. After months of development and testing in Southbridge by the research group, it was decided to have Keen become the manufacturer of the Sidewinder contract. I had the lucky job to transfer the technology from AO Southbridge to AO Keen, which caused me to reside in Southbridge for 6 months. For the first time, I learned about the magnitude of the Southbridge complex. I also learned that it took much legwork to go from plant to plant, crossed bridges, opened many doors, and went up and down many flights of stairs in the business transactions. Ed Dixon was the project manager, a fine professional person, and I met many other professional people who were eager to assist us in the success of the Sidewinder project. I also worked with Al Batista, a real treat for me. When the AO research group was transferred to Framingham, we and Keen traveled to Framingham to obtain technical help and assistance. One interesting project was a student laser, a concept originated by the research lab with Dr. Mike Polanyi, and Keen produced it in quality. For us in New Hampshire, AO Southbridge Research Group was the elite technical center with high concentration of scientific professionals. One day we were asked at the Keen plant to generate and polish simple lens blanks. With our great experience in producing precision optical components for scientific instruments, it seemed to be of no great difficulty. We produced the blanks, shipped the blanks to AO, and received the word that our polished surfaces were not acceptable. After lengthy debates, Dr. John Winthrop came to Keen and tried to explain to us the special technical requirements for this blank. We learned after much trial and tribulation the blanks were for the AO7 progressive power lens and needed special surface treatments. I always remember John's patience with us in learning this new process. Sometime I went to fiber optic plant located outside the AO Southbridge fence area and was on the other side of the Quinnebog River. Bill McGlurg was the plant manager. The product development was under the supervision of Dr. Sigmund. We and Keen polished these fiber optic components that were used in the night vision devices for Fort Belvoir. I remember talking to Bill McGlurg about the huge Southbridge operation, the many departments, operations, and various management structures. We agreed it is nice to visit AO Southbridge, but much nicer to go back to your small plant at Keen or fiber optics. Then one day I got a telephone call from Dr. Glenn Hastings asking me to join his staff and become manufacturing service manager worldwide. That certainly changed things. The family moved from Keen to Sturbridge. I was placed in a fancy office on Mahogany Row and began to interchange manufacturing information, not only between the various plants in Southbridge, but in Austria, France, England, Brazil, Mexico, and Canada. This job had by far the steepest learning curve I have ever experienced. I also got a taste of the Warner Lambert Group in Morris Plains, New Jersey. Now I'm really on the inside of AO. The key events I always remember is the AO people I met. I worked with Ron Heislop, Aolite, Pete Berger, Lens Plant, Cless Robbins, Frame Plant, and also began to understand the safety division and its product line. Traveling around the world, being in contact with the international manufacturing facilities, I got the impression that for international, AO Southbridge was the mecca of the AO organization. And with all the new products, especially the plastic lenses and anti-reflection coatings and new contact lens products. The Southbridge Research Division was in the midst of giving high-technology services under the guidance of Dr. Don Rotenberg. From Glenn Hastings' staff, I transferred to supervise the frame manufacturing of Southbridge, Frederick, and Nicolette. Little did I know about the manufacturing complexity of a fashion-oriented product, Oscar de la Renta. Bob Greasy and Dorothy Hamill were in the frame fashion product brand leaders that were supposed to conquer that market. John Enholm in the frame marketing did his best to understand the inflexibility of frame manufacturing. Organizational changes in AO were as frequent as the season of the year. One day I ended up with a manufacturing coordinator in international division working for Gene Lewis. Much needed to be done to keep the manufacturing operations going in Frankfurt, Germany, and Virgo in France. Brazil also went through some restructuring, so I had Harold Threlfelder, Germany, Herbert Zock, Virgo, and Albert Meyer, Brazil, and my friend Octavio Rubio, Mexico. As Warner Lambert decided to downsize the international division, I worked with Terry Dunn, who was a true gentleman, a man of real understanding in difficult situations. After the 150th birthday celebration in 1983, it became apparent that AO had seen its best years and the future was at best uncertain. The daily question was, who is still here, who is gone? Somehow I ended up with the finest group of people, and it was called AO Tech. The task was to bring our new products in the progressive power lens line to transfer a complicated slumping process to manufacturing facilities in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and later on to Southbridge. If there was ever a situation where personal devotion to a job was seen its best, it was the AO Tech with John Winthrop as the leader and inspiration. Alex Menihart and Jim Duslack were people that accomplished much under sometimes difficult circumstances. AO Tech was perhaps the last group worked on the cutting edge of ophthalmic technology. During my recent years of association with the various divisions of AO and being involved with so many departments, meeting people, and different professionals and skills, I will always remember AO's finest people, the receptionists and secretaries. It was a pleasure to go to different plants and operations, and because you were greeted with much kindness by the receptionists like B. Hamill in the research group, and even a difficult situation, that kindness and smile made your day. One, management efficiency and effectiveness is to a large part dependent on the secretary one has. Without their intuitions and skills to guide you through the maze of management tasks and responsibilities, one is just lost. So I always remember Marge Breen and her outstanding skill in making sure I had access to top management when I needed it. Forever I will be grateful for Margot Fontaine for her devotion to the cause, her patience in understanding my oddities, and her incredible energy to get a job done. You find this story written in lousy handwriting, readable only because of Margot. From July 1952 until July 1988, it was a long association with AO. From the outsider of AO Southbridge to the insider of AO Southbridge, it was fascinating and rewarding working experience. I can hardly visualize any working career where you meet so many fine people because of the spirit AO prevailed for so many years. As one begins to contemplate about things and perhaps to find reason for the rise and fall of the American Optical, one must find a closure and acknowledgement of the complexity of the product line and the diversity of AO organization, the people that have come and gone over the years. After all, people were the ecstasy and the agony in the work in our business. Again, that last recollection was Herm Kreissle, and it really gave you a flavor for the international scope of American Optical and its people. And Herm and all these people that I'm recalling are really great people. Harding Jenkins is another person that was a good family friend, and Harding wrote this to me in around the year 2000, I believe. I remember back in the late 1940s and early 1950s when the grinding shop was my home, the AO decided to have an open house days and encouraged us to bring our families into the plant and see where their husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters worked, to see what they did in that huge building. We all were proud of where we worked, and we all should have been. The grinding shop, the Heart of Lensdale, was the biggest surfacing building in the world. For a number of years, the open house days were in Christmas time, to the departments decorated their area. In the grinding shop, the guests walked the main aisle from John Toomey's office through Clayton Spinney's meniscus section, through Pete Kralig's cryptox section, past Mose Riopel's double-deck flat section, all the way to Leo Godou's toric section. Most sections decorated with crepe paper and all kinds of season's greetings, each section trying to outdo the others. My wife, then Betty Stoddard, in personnel, used to tell me that the job candidates often said, "I don't want to work in that Rouge." These open house days showed the visitors that working in Rouge was not so bad. We were all proud of our job and where we worked. Again, that was Harding Jenkins, and I think I'm often asked what made AO great, and I think it was people worked their way up and knew the business. George Wells did that. He started working for William Beecher at the age of 19. He worked his way up to being president, and that's what it was, the people with the experience that made American Optical truly great. In that last recollection by Harding Jenkins, he mentioned the open house. Well, as I was reading Herm Kreissle's recollection, I think you may have seen the 1974 Family Day, and those were slides I restored from 110 format slides that were difficult to copy, but I now have that ability, and it was fun to see the AO Family Day of 1974, and I think some of you will remember. That's Stan Sidlick, and that's my first desk at my first job at American Optical in 1974. That's where I sat. And this was my first standards meeting in 1990. Dave Lamar and Raul Van Lichten and John Young, all three on the right, they all were formerly AO employees, and at that time worked for other companies. But of standards, my father helped establish ISO standards and was on the chaired the Lens Technical Committee, and now I chair the Lens Technical Committee. And this, by the way, is the Glass Executive area, and that was the longest running product line from 1952 to 2005. And 2 days before the death of JFK, he ordered some Glass Executive lenses, and I learned that and have that order in the optical files. America, this is in the town hall, and there were, can you believe that? But look at the crowd in the town hall that were at a bowling banquet, and that's just amazing. And of course, there are many outings, and the Quarter Century Club would often have its outings over at the Hamilton Rod and Gun Club. That's my dad and me at a birthday party, all AO employees, but that's my 5th birthday party at Eileen Rayner's in Auburn. And this is another, I think this could be Hamilton Rod and Gun Club. Yes, it's hard for me to read there, but Quarter Century Club, 1,100 people involved in that club. My next recollection is kind of an unusual one because my father ran the Aolite division, and in the 1960s he had the opportunity to show somebody around who was starting a Solar Optical, which was Scientific Optical Laboratories of Australia. He came to the house. I had a pen pal through him, but in any case, he later, he was a founder, but that grew to such a large business that it actually purchased American Optical in 1996. So in the year 2000, I contacted Noel in Australia, and he read this. He wrote this. I read with interest Don's Aolite history and fondly remember the times I spent with him. It must have been about 65, 67 that we developed a lens called Cruvera, which was a CR39 lens with carbon included in the matrix, which gave the effect of the wearer being able to see through cloud-like atmosphere. I was successful in introducing this lens to NASA and the fact that most of the astronauts up in the Apollo 17. I recall that caused some concern within AO as being foreign manufacturer, one of the few companies that supplied goods for the training and orbital flights. I cannot recall the name of the marketing manager at AO at the time, but I do recall one discussion we had regarding AO's efforts to produce a product that we would be able to replace Solar's lens. The visits I made to both B&O and AO never resulted in technical knowledge exchange, a license, as both companies wanted to sign me comprehensive confidentiality agreements, which may have, in my opinion, infringed upon some of Solar's research and development work. You will see from the following, I did license Hoyer in 1972. At the time of my retirement, at the end of 1982, we had approximately 5,000 employees worldwide working on the CR39 products. I believe there are now some 8,000. As you know, the company is now listed on the New York Stock Exchange and so forth. 3M, the company that tried very hard to buy Solar before its acquisition to Armalite, and I know that the price they would have paid exceeded that of Pilkington. In those days, I believe the style of management did not fit. And then he goes on to kind of giving us Solar history. But what I found very interesting about the AO Solar connection was one that I had as a little boy, and then I still have in a sense, because I work with Solar people to this day in Australia. This next recollection is an interesting one. It's the oldest recollection I have of American Optical, and it was in 1867, believe it or not. Bob Briere from Southbridge sent me this, and here's an excerpt of what he sent in 2009. Hi Dick, I received a call last evening from two ladies doing genealogical research. One is from Kentucky, her sister from Ohio. Included in the discussion was her willingness to copy pages copied from a diary she had received from a relative. I assume it was a young lady who wrote the diary, and she is describing in part a visit to this area. I could not pinpoint where she stayed, but assume it was either Southbridge or Sturbridge. I am sending this material, and this was from Roger and Barbara Dick in Illinois, and it's a Azalea Edson, August 9th, 1867 recollection, and this is what is written on Friday, August 9th, 1867. And this is a discussion of the spec shop, which at that point it had started where on the corner of Main and Central, and then it moved down to where the Save More gas station is. But this is about the spec shop prior to becoming American Optical. Morning spent in mending, afternoon went to the spec shop of Mr. Cole with Luella, ever Willie. Her husband left his work to show us around. He first told us how frames were prepared by stretching the steel, then winding it around the iron size and shape that glass required. This was then cut from the roller, another little piece soldered into it and sawed apart, another little hole punched in to insert the temple pieces to it. Then they were placed in vitriol water to remove the cinders. The glass was fitted, the steel part polished, and then burnt blue in heated sand. The gold and silver pieces were melted into the furnace, added more alloy if desired. The frames were prepared in the manner of steel, then prepared, the glasses fitted, or before fitting the glass they were engraved in, if desired, which is done by warming a cement, placing the part to be engraved in this, letting it remain until it gets cool, then by instruments with the desired figure pounded lightly with a hammer, very small. When the engraving is done, warm wax removed the work. Soldering was done by holding the pieces to be joined near a lamp, then placing a hollow piece of steel in the mouth and letting it pass through the blaze directly onto the pieces to be joined. Then by blowing the blaze is conducted directly upon it. We were shown the different kinds of glass. One kind of a pebble distinguished it from glass very clear. You could by its coldness. It felt like ice. We also saw them cutting the glass with machines set with diamonds. The framework of the spectacles were polished by holding them upon fast revolving wheels covered with some thick material, some of which were wet by the vitriol. Some were upon an iron wheel held by a wheel of bar of iron. This made the fire fly. After seeing all this there was to be seen, we returned home by stopping at Phelps with some amber beads. We met Luella at the door with one's new sack in hand. It was spoiled, which had been done by dampening the seams to press. So the work was now to get Pelpham, which was done. Ann Dexter called in the evening to make her adieus before parting for Springfield. That again was a diary entry on August 9th, 1867. My next recollection is special to me, and there may be a portion that I've already read, but this is from my father, Don Whitney, and how he started at American Optical in 1947. This is from a diary he wrote prior to his death in '98. Having majored in astronomy, a logical occupation for me would be something related to optics. I went for applications to Eastman Kodak, Bosch & Lomb, and American Optical, and was interviewed by all three firms. Kodak had nothing for me at the time. B&L made me a tentative offer, but AO made me a firm offer. Jan and I made the trip to Southbridge together, and I remember we were a bit less than impressed with the approach along Worcester Street. However, with a job offer at hand, we decided this would be a good place for me to start. The company arranged for me to rent a room at the Babbitt House on Elm Street, and I rented a garage on William Street, just a short walk from my house. My first day at AO was Monday, March 30th, 1947. After a brief welcome interview by Byron Ziegler, I was joined by John Davis, who would be my boss. They had set up a desk for me in the back room, used by Dr. Edgar D. Tillier, Director of Research at the Optical Laboratory. I had an office mate, Marcel Benjamin, who soon became a close friend. My job was titled Apprentice Lens Designer and involved trigonometric computations which would be done using logarithms of a mechanical calculator. It represented a challenge because it involved ophthalmic optics, where I had little optical training, as I had in classical optics. There was quite a difference. I was fortunate, though, in having fine teachers. My boss, John, Henry Fernald, and a co-worker, and even Dr. Tillier. I started work on Monday and continued on Tuesday, just before midnight on Tuesday. I became violently ill and began vomiting. I knew from experience that things like this hit me hard, so I headed for the car and drove the 60-mile trip back to Newton in a little more than an hour and a quarter, including stops to throw up. Mother sent for the doctor on Wednesday morning and gave me an injection and put me out long enough to interrupt the sickness spells. I finished recovering on Thursday and was back at AO on Friday. Not in a suspicious way to start at a new job, but at least I made it back to work in a couple of days. The doctor blamed it on a piece of Boston cream pie I'd eaten for supper at a local restaurant. Cream fillings, it seems, a good breeding ground for the grip. I liked to work at AO from day one and found my associates to be not only helpful but good company. As it turns out, I made a fortunate decision to join AO's research group. It's a move that I have never regretted. With just a few weeks to my upcoming wedding, where we would live became a burning issue. Being so soon after World War II, housing was scarce. However, we had a lucky break. One of Jan's close friends lived in Spencer, and her family knew of a furnished apartment, which was available for months of July and August. That took a little pressure off, and we settled in that apartment. On Friday, June 20th, I left work a bit early for a weekend of my wedding. I remember I went out the North Street gate at AO, and the guard stopped me and asked where I was going. I replied that I was going to get married. His response was, I will never forget it, "Why, you're just a child." Meanwhile, things at work were going well. I had been at AO for about a year, and among other things had assumed responsibility for the calculation of special prescriptions. AO has several hundred prescription laboratories located across the country. When these laboratories received a specifically complicated prescription, they asked for know-how on the equipment to fabricate such as prescriptions in the special prescription laboratory in Southbridge. When these problem prescriptions required special calculations beyond the capability of the special prescription laboratory personnel, they referred to the research laboratory and to me. Because there were often sales considerations regarding how or if the prescription would be accepted, I would meet every afternoon with Ben Green from the lens sales, and we would review the ramifications of each of these unusual prescriptions. It was amazing the amount of time and effort that went into trying to help patients with unusual visual problems. This was certainly not a money-making aspect of the business. Most of my time at AO during this period was spent performing special lens design computations using a mechanical calculator and sometimes just logarithms. I worked not only on special lens design but also on a wide range of optical problems, ranging from simple camera lenses to Schmidt corrector plates for the projection television. I also became involved not only in the design of these items but in performing laboratory measurements. It was enjoyable work and provided a marvelous training ground. The whole experience was made special by the fine group of people with whom I was working. So again, the purpose of this presentation over the 48 minutes which it takes to go through these pictures and so forth is to highlight the people that made the company great. It's the people that are the company, and I've been fortunate to work with many of the people mentioned. Dr. Winthrop was my boss, Dave Lamar, and many others, and started work with Al Watson in the Central Test Lab. That's John Young sitting in the center. I work with him. Bernie Groman, talking to my father, he was unfortunately struck and killed by a car about 10 years ago up in Buffalo where he worked. And he's the one that created the non-contact tonometer, which is that puff of air that when you go to the doctor's office and get a puff of air, that was his device. There's Dan Morrill. This is, I think this might have been my father's retirement party in 1983. Milt Freeman, who started the AO reunions, and there's Alex Torter on the right, both of whom are deceased. But again, you've seen the People of AO reunions, which I again will emphasize continue to this day. That's the R&D. John Davis on the right, Dr. Winthrop, to the left of Bernie Groman, and this is Stan Sidlick, Alex Menihat, and Art Brochu, and Debbie Willette, visible, and Bob Innis with Ina Passe Dawson, who I work with, and many, many people I have to thank for. There's Phil McCarthy in the gray suit, and he was a boss of mine, and Arnie Simpson's sitting at that table. And again, Dave Lamar, who I think was my favorite boss, perhaps, was really a wonderful person, and unfortunately he passed away while a sudden heart attack. In any case, I think you can see that certainly American Optical was a worldwide and still has a worldwide influence, but this is Glass Research, Wes Reed and John Anderson on the right, family friends, and this is the Airlight casting that my father ran in Southbridge. So it's just a wide variety of products, influence in many areas, which I will highlight in a separate presentation. But that's my dad during one of his anniversaries at American Optical in the 1980s, I believe it was, or 70s, I'm sorry. That's a casting area in Southbridge. One time I went down to Mexico and still remember seeing a few years ago AO Southbridge ovens in use that had been there probably 20 years. But that's my father's office in the 1970s. And I found it interesting, I don't know if you see, that's me in my thinner days, but 1999, prior to the demolition of the main plant and restoration. That is another presentation I will make at some point, showing the demolition and construction of that facility was quite something in the year 2000-2001, was something to watch, and I'm sure a lot of you watched it. That's Marcel Benjamin on the very left, who was with my father, and as you recall, the first office he held. And John Young and some of the guards, that was probably 1999. And that's the North Street Gate that Dad talked about. Harding Jenkins. Certainly the war effort and American Optical's contribution to the war, two wars, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. I was even involved in designing and working on a steeply curved polycarbonate lenses for the Apache helicopter pilots. And actually it was interesting, one of my jobs was to determine the prescription that we cemented a 21 diopter steeply curved powered lens for individual use by the helicopter pilots, because they needed visual correction, and this was a specialized device. Well, this concludes my tribute to American Optical people and what made the company great. I hope you enjoyed it. There'll be plenty more presentations coming down the line. This will be something that I hope to do courtesy of the American Optical Museum, Optical Heritage Museum, and again, more on that as well. So if you like what you see, please you're encouraged to help as we go forward on this project, and I'll be telling you how you can help in the days and months to come. So thanks for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed it, and be in touch again soon.